If I could only read 3 books for the rest of my life, it would be these 3. And I chose these simply because I, one, enjoy them, and 2, I think they are books that will get better the more I read them. And 2 of them are collected works. I don't know if that's necessarily a cop out. If that is a cop out, I can give you the specific ones that I would really just take, and they're not very long. So, yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So, here are the books right here. Hopefully, you guys can see them. Hopefully, it centers. Hopefully, it focuses. The first thing that I want to talk about is the collected works of Khalil Gibran. And the book that I would choose to pick out from this, if I could only choose one of his works, I don't know if you're going to count collected works. I don't. In my book, I think this is one book because it's all kind of fragmented stuff. But if I had to pick one thing out of this that I would solely read, it would be The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And he has a lot of other great works, but I think The Prophet stands head and shoulders above simply because it's his most digestible work. It's his most simplistic work, but it's also one of his most profound, and it's perhaps his best selling. I'm not sure if his poems have sold more, but The Prophet is basically a story about a prophet, and he's leaving his city to, go out into the world. Maybe it's symbolic of his death, maybe it's not. Who knows? I don't think it really matters, but he's giving this city advice one last time. And they ask him everything from, how to bring up children, how to have friends, what is the point of sorrow, what is the point of sadness, what is the meaning of life, all sorts of questions. And in like 90 pages, Gibran kind of takes you on an entire spiritual experience. And I think if I could only read a few books, this would certainly be one of them that I really want to spend a whole lot of time with, a whole lot of time digesting, because it's poetry, but it's also philosophy. It's deep, but it's also shallow. And there's almost this contradiction that exists inside the works that allow you to kind of parse through the more difficult aspects of life. Like, it's the idea of the Tao Te Ching. It's like the eternal Tao is not the one that can be spoken. Like, things that we can only perceive, things that we can only feel, and then we try to talk about them, and it falls short. And that's what I really enjoy about it. And one of my favorite ideas from this book is that every sorrow deepens your joy. Every time you feel pain, it allows you to put things into perspective, to feel happiness that much more, to appreciate the good times because you've experienced bad times. And to me, that's an idea that I keep coming back to. It's similar to the Stoic idea of amor fati, or that very famous Nietzsche quote that what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And I think inside of these pages is a whole lot of great stuff. Sand and Foam is perhaps my favorite work by Gibran, but I don't know if I'd want to reread it as many times as I want to reread The Prophet. So with that said, I really urge you to pick up Khalil Gibran. If you haven't read anything by him yet, the first place I would start is with The Prophet. The next place is Sand and Foam. I think that's his best work. But yeah, I just overall love Khalil Gibran. The next thing we have is William Blake, and this is his complete poems. Blake is interesting because he wasn't just a poet, but he was also an artist. As in that every single work he wrote, he engraved it onto, I think it was bronze tablets. I think that's the service he used. But he also had various pictures like you see on the cover, and it really added to the poetry because he would handwrite it, he would hand engrave all of the drawings, and it's really something special. Like, if you are at all interested in William Blake, I really urge you to look up some of his stencils, look up some of his original works, because it's very, 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 very impressive. But overall, Blake is similar to Gibran. I feel like they have a lot of carryover, but Blake just writes in a little bit of different style, and Blake was a borderline insane person. And there's something about being borderline insane that allows you to become a great artist. And when I talk about insane, I mean that this guy would walk outside and see angels in the trees. And, maybe he would be committed today, but it really added to his level of artistry. It really added to his level of creativity. And, so few people are able to capture, consciousness or creativity or the universal spirit as Blake is. And the work that I would really, really, really hearken on that you should read is The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. I think that's his best work that I've read so far. Obviously, I haven't read all of it. That's the next thing that I really start delving into, is the poetry of Blake and the poetry of Khalil Gibran, and become more well versed in those things, because I truly do enjoy both those authors. But The Marriage of Heaven and Hell is super, super fascinating because it talks about the necessity of good and bad. It talks about the push and pull. It talks about the need for evil, the need for good, the ebbs and the flows of life that give it all meaning. And I really enjoy especially the Proverbs of Hell, which is basically Blake's attempt to show that traditional morality is in some ways contradictory, and in some ways that there's things that are seen as taboo that in certain regards can be good. And it's really to break you out of the frame of, everyday life, break you out of the frame of tradition. And there's a point where Blake says the mechanical mind can only see the world in one way, but the artist can see the world in infinite ways, which allows the artist to actively change the world that we see around us. And really, Blake's final solution of everything is that, if you have creativity, then you have everything you need. Because if you have a creative faculty, if you have an imagination, if you have the capability to carry through with that imagination, then you can change every circumstance of your life. But if you think, I can only do this one thing because this is who I am, I can only play by this rule book because this is the one that was given to me, then you're extremely limited. And really what Blake thought was the imagination was the salvation of humanity. And it's really just some of the most impressive work that I've ever read. And I really urge you to pick up William Blake. He also has tremendous poems such as The Tiger, such as The Lamb. I'm trying to remember the other ones I love, but I don't remember the names of them. But honestly, any poem you read by Blake is going to dazzle you, and it's definitely well worth reading. And the last thing we have is Ulysses by James Joyce. Ulysses is one of the weirdest books I've ever read. It's one of the most difficult books I've ever read. And it's truly unique in that it's not meant to be understood on first reading. Most of the time when you have an author, what they really enjoy is, having somebody think that they're smart. But for centuries, however long James Joyce, I think he wrote I can't remember when Ulysses was published. It was like 1920 or sometime around then. But since the day that Ulysses was published, people have been debating on every single word. And Joyce himself described Ulysses in the process of writing it as, I wrote this book so that for generations upon generations, professors will be debating everything that I say in every single context, and it will be seen from all different perspectives. And Ulysses is a book that can be read infinite times, and it can be seen in infinite different ways, because more or less what it does is it maps human consciousness. James Joyce was not interested in writing stories about great figures. He was interested in writing great stories about the mundane and building them up to something that's completely interesting, building them up to show that everyday people have just as interesting lives as the rich, the elite, the powerful, the people that are usually talked about in these sorts of books. And Carl Jung himself said that if James Joyce didn't have his art, he probably would be insane, and the only thing that was keeping him on the borderline of sanity and insanity was his ability to capture this through his writing. And if you've ever read Ulysses, you are kind of astounded by how little of it that you understand, but how much you enjoy it. And it's something that I feel like I'm going to come back to time and time again. And I really think it would be one of the better books to include on a list like this. And the last thing I want to end with is, I'm sure I could have included the Bible, the Gita, the Tao Te Ching. I could have included all those types of texts, but I think that's kind of a cop-out. I think those are the easy answers, and I would rather give these more fun answers and these more, non-obvious answers. So I know the list might not be exactly what you want it to be, but, here's me trying to expand your horizons and get you to read new things and maybe even reread new things. I'm actually going to reread my favorite book ever, The Book of Mere Dad, very soon, so that's what really got me thinking about this idea. But overall, I think these are great choices. Let me know your choices. Let me know if you agree or disagree or whatever it is. I'm always interested in, what other people think about books that I like or other books that I have not read yet. If you want to read my book, the link is in the description. If you want to recommend me books, there's a link for that in the description as well. If you want to get the stuff I write on a daily basis, go ahead, join the school community. If none of those things are appealing to you, I'm glad you made it this far, because it's awesome that people are even interested in anything I have to say. So with that said, I love you guys so much. Thank you guys so much. Peace out. I will catch you in the next one.